Okay, hello and welcome everybody. Thank you for attending this webinar on accessing China's GBA via Hong Kong listing, essential information for life sciences companies. I'm Hamish, I'm CEO at Cisema. I am a lawyer by training, qualified in New South Wales, Australia, as well as in Hong Kong, which has been my home for the last 8 years.
And I'm Jackie. I've joined Cisema for over 4 years. I've studied my bachelor's in Canada and previously worked in Beru Veritas, specialized in testing, inspection, and certification. Currently, I'm the lead to support Hong Kong medical device listing and drug registration projects.
So a little bit more about our company, Cisema, just so you have the clear background about the perspective from which we are speaking. We are a provider of regulatory affairs, quality assurance, clinical research, testing, and safety certifications for China and for Hong Kong. We have over 20 years experience, founded in 2002 in Munich, Germany, and Beijing, China. We cover various sectors: medical device and IVD, pharma, cosmetics, health foods, as well as some industrial goods and consumer goods. We have a dedicated and full-time in-house team. We strive to ensure that all our projects are done with full service and with customer experience and enjoyment and expectations in mind. We also want to ensure that we are independent so you can keep your unconstrained choice of distributors. Full cost quotations are our motto. We have around 100 staff. Most are in mainland China, but also located around the world, with offices dedicated to helping and supporting international companies with their China registration, market entry, and compliance. So here's our agenda for today's short session. We will first talk about some background and insights for the GBA pathway. Then we'll talk about some advantages of specific pre-filing for the Guangdong MPA, before we talk about some other recent regulatory guidelines relating to the GBA pathway. And finally, depending on time, we'll dive into more detail about the pre-step, the Hong Kong listing for medical device or IVD, or drug approvals in Hong Kong for pharmaceutical products.
So let's begin. So the official announcement about the Hong Kong Greater Bay Area integration dates back to November 6th of 2019. The Hong Kong government issued a press release welcoming the 16 policy measures introduced by the central government of China for permitting the use of Hong Kong registered drugs and also common medical devices from designated Hong Kong-owned healthcare institutions to the China Greater Bay Area. In September 2020, it was announced that the University of Hong Kong Shenzhen Hospital will be the first institution in GBA to use these Hong Kong registered drugs and also common MD medical devices on a pilot basis, starting from January until July 2021. The regulatory measure for the GBA pathway was officially announced for implementation in August 2021. 4 designated medical institutions in GBA were added to the list during then, and another 14 in February 2023. There are 2 announcements, most importantly to note, from last year, 2023, October, in the Hong Kong Chief Executive's 2023 policy address. One is about setting up the preparatory office for the Hong Kong Center for Medical Products Regulation, the CMPR, and the other is to establish the Greater Bay Area International Clinical Trial Institute. Both are planned for completion this year. The end goal of the CMPR is to, in the long run, is to be a standalone statutory body, accelerating the launch of new drugs and medical devices to the market, and foster development of R&D, testing of medical products and related industries. The Greater Bay Area International Clinical Trial Institute itself is envisioned as to provide a one-stop clinical trial support platform for medical research institutions. Together with the Shenzhen municipal government, the Hong Kong government will explore cooperation with clinical trial networks in the mainland, in particular the GBA, through the Institute, and coordinate clinical trial work between the 2 places to comply with national and also international standards. So here in this slide, we can get an idea of the market size of Hong Kong and the Greater Bay Area by comparing the population size to countries in Europe, indicating the market potential. The Hong Kong population is a bit less than Switzerland's population. However, we can see that the population in the Greater Bay Area already exceeds UK population. As of February 6th of 2024, 4,726 medical devices were actively listed in Hong Kong, and we expect the number of Hong Kong applications to increase substantially due to Greater Bay Area developments. As of January 16th, 2024, 56 medical devices and drug products in total have obtained GBA pathway approval to be used in the designated hospitals.
So there are a number of approval trends over the last few years since the implementation of the GBA pathway. We've just set out here on the slide an indication of how those trends shape over time. There are batches released from statistics from Guangzhou Customs and from Guangdong MPA, which show how many approvals there are in relation to drugs or medical devices over the last few years. Once you receive the slides, which please email us to ask for a copy, there are also embedded links here to the relevant official announcements of the relevant regulatory body. Most recently, you can see that 2 drugs were approved and 10 medical devices in January of this year. Here is the specifics. You can see that there were two pharma products approved, as I mentioned, for GBA. That means for sale in the Greater Bay Area, even though these products are not approved for China-wide sales. There are also 10 medical devices approved, including catheters, pulsed field ablation generators, some pacemakers, and some other products. According to the Guangdong MPA, a total of 28 medical devices and 28 pharma products have been approved by total since the GBA scheme has started, and that has benefited a total of 4,500 patients so far.
So these, in this slide, these are the total 19 designated GBA medical institutions for the GBA pathway itself. So it is important to note that these hospitals are the ones that are actually submitting the application to the Guangdong MPA for approval of these importing medical devices and IVDs from Hong Kong, as well as pharmaceuticals into the GBA. Another 27 Hong Kong-owned healthcare institutions in the GBA have already been set up since 2019. And we expect more of these designated GBA medical institutions to come in future.
Yes, and there's a small mess up with some of the animations, but the key message is that there has been an increasing number of institutions that have been approved over time, and we expect that to continue. The first hospital that was approved and really was the pilot was the Hong Kong University Shenzhen Hospital. And in a conversation with the hospital chief last year at the Hong Kong what they call the global trade fair for medical and health products in Hong Kong, he said that they were seeing a lot of demand for Hong Kong persons in Shenzhen region, and so they wanted to try to satisfy that rather than have Hong Kongers travel back to Hong Kong for their medical service. So that may be some interesting, helpful background. That spurred the start of this pilot, which has then been expanded to all of the GBA region, and with the proviso that there are these specific hospitals.
In this slide is the application process for the Greater Bay Area pathway. Within just 5 business days of submission, applications undergo a thorough review to ensure that they meet the set criteria. If the application meets the standards or can be recertified quickly, it proceeds to acceptance with a notice issued immediately. If additional information is needed, clear instructions are provided within 5 days. Moving on to the review stage, preliminary opinions on applications are provided, leading to the decision-making phase. Once the decision is finalized by the Guangdong MPA and the Guangdong Health Commission, the application can be considered as complete upon the issuance of approval documents, unless otherwise rejected. Finally, applicants can expect to receive the approval documents delivered within 2 business days. The application process can be expected to take around 40 working days. Once the product is approved for importing into the Greater Bay Area, the registration will be valid for 1 year. If any product recalls or adverse events were to occur, the designated medical institution holds the responsibility to make arrangements and report to the local MPA.
So we're going to go into a little bit more detail, but the key point here is that it's the hospital itself that makes the application to the Guangdong MPA. So it's the hospital that is the driver of the application itself for this GBA pathway. In this slide, we talk a little bit more about the factors that are likely to lead to that hospital purchasing or wanting to purchase the product. In an event late last year with some regulatory authority members from Guangdong MPA, the stress or the emphasis was on the hospital itself being the key factor. If the hospital procurement wants the product, then it is likely to be urgently needed. Here is some more detail, however, that fills out the scope of the specific regulatory requirements. The product, as mentioned, should be urgently needed for clinical use. It should be already used and operated in public hospitals in Hong Kong or Macau. And it should feature advanced technology. It shouldn't already be, or a similar product should not already be used within the China-wide system. China mainland, just to be specific. For pharmaceutical products, the framework is very similar. And we've summarized in 4 broad headings of ensuring that safety, efficacy, usage, and the management system are all compliant. Safety and efficacy, as the Guangdong MPA sees it, are demonstrated by the public usage already in Hong Kong and Macau hospitals. That is the reason that the usage first is required. And then the management system is the various frameworks behind that for applicants to have their product approved. Just to emphasize again, it is the hospital purchase decision that's the key factor.
So in this slide, we talk about the pre-approval filing for the GBA pathway. The purpose of this initiative is to facilitate the application process for designated medical institutions that are seeking to import and use Hong Kong drugs and medical devices. By providing timely access to necessary research data, this streamlined process can reduce the preparation time for the GBA application itself and encourage active participation from the overseas marketing authorizations holders, the MAH. The scope of the database is same as previously mentioned. For drugs, they should be already listed in Hong Kong, urgently needed for clinical use, not subject to import permit management for anesthetic drugs, stimulants. For medical devices, they should be listed, procured, or even already used in public hospitals in Hong Kong and possess advanced clinical application technology. The filing process for this pre-approval involves completing the necessary application forms and providing relevant materials as per the requirements outlined in the data checklist here at the very middle. Once submitted, designated medical institutions can apply for authorization to access the data for internal assessment and application preparation. The Guangdong MPA oversees the management of this database and ensures the authenticity and completeness of the submitted materials. The establishment of this database represents a significant step moving forward to provide a centralized platform for accessing essential research data, expediting the import and use of urgently needed products, and ultimately improving the healthcare delivery in the region. On February 18, 2024, The Healthcare Security Administration of the Guangdong Province has issued the working guidelines for the implementation of medical service pricing projects under the GBA expedited pathway that came into effect on March 1st, 2024, and onwards for 5 years. Designated institutions will be required to maintain the records according to the provincial regulations, actively sharing project and pricing details with local authorities. However, they have the autonomy to independently set prices for service items associated with the GBA expedited scheme, drawing upon established practices from the overseas markets to ensure fairness, legality, and credibility. This flexibility allows overseas manufacturers and designated institutions to work together in determining pricing structures that adhere to fair and legal standards, preventing any additional charges beyond approved rates. We recommend overseas manufacturers to collaborate closely with the designated medical institutions in the GBA area to ensure pricing strategies are aligned with mutually agreed expectations during the negotiations.
So that's our deep dive into the GBA approval. Now we're going to take a step back, so to speak, and talk about how do you get to this stage? Because we've already mentioned how you need to have a Hong Kong or Macau usage, and therefore that means an approval or listing. So what does that mean and what does that involve? We're going to talk through those points in the last 10 minutes.
This is a quick overview of the current organization structure of the Hong Kong government's Health Bureau, which was established on July 1st of 2022, after the Food and Health Bureau was being restructured. The Department of Health is the only department under the Health Bureau and responsible for overseeing the safety, efficacy, and quality of medical products marketed in Hong Kong. Set out on the right is the Hospital Authority. The Hospital Authority is a statutory body managing all the government hospitals and institutes in Hong Kong, whilst both the DOH, the Department of Health, and the Hospital Authority are responsible for reporting to the Hong Kong Health Bureau. The reason for mentioning the Hospital Authority is because they are responsible for purchasing pharmaceuticals and medical devices for Hong Kong public hospitals. As mentioned, medical devices procured or commonly used in Hong Kong public hospitals and also drug registered in Hong Kong are major requirements for the GBA approval pathway. The Drug Office was established in 2011 and is responsible for drug registration in Hong Kong. The MDCO Medical Device Control Office was established in 2004 and renamed as the Medical Device Division MDD in 2019. The MDD is responsible for implementing the MDAX, the Medical Device Administrative Control System, under which manufacturers and importers can list their medium to high-risk medical devices and IVDs with the Department of Health. As mentioned about the CMPR, they're aiming to streamline the regulatory processes and foster research and development in the medical sector. The Hong Kong Chief Executive also mentioned in his speech that he expects potential upgrading of the CMPR as a standalone statutory body in the long run, which will help to accelerate the launch of new drugs and medical devices to the market. Hong Kong's Secretary of Health, Lo Chung Mao, also mentioned in an exclusive interview with the Hong Kong newspaper Singtao Daily that the CMPR is expected to be implemented in the first half of this year, 2024. This means that major regulatory updates in Hong Kong may come along upon the implementation of the CMPR. Our suggestion to manufacturers interested to enter the Hong Kong and GBA market is to have their medical devices listed, the sooner the better, because it puts you in a ready position for sales to public hospitals in Hong Kong and in the GBA.
And so what about Hong Kong drug registration? How does that work? Thank you.
So on the slide, in the yellow box, in the yellow box, you can see the ordinance, the laws that controls the pharmaceutical, and pharmaceutical products are required to do the registration in order to sell in the Hong Kong market. Otherwise, you might be committing an offense for selling unregistered pharmaceutical products in Hong Kong. For the purpose of registration, manufacturers will also be required to provide documents of the product to support its safety, efficacy, and quality. The documents usually require the manufacturer and quality control procedure, clinical study reports, and oversees post-marketing study results of the product. We've provided the reference links to these ordinances and also to the official website of the Hong Kong Drug Office. You can have a closer look upon clicking on them when you receive the slides. Each guidance notes outlines the general requirements for registration of pharmaceutical products and should be read in conjunction with the current laws. Applicants can expect the dossier format to be very similar to the ICH CTD and may also find the application process to be a lot straightforward with existing information of modules 2 to 5 ready for submission. The document submission requirements may be slightly different depending on the classification of the pharmaceutical product. For instance, one free sale certificate or CPP will be sufficient for the Hong Kong registration dossier in general. However, 2 certificates will be required for NCE applications. This also shows the importance to why the applicants should figure out the product classification and refer to the specific requirements in the respective official guidance notes. In the yellow box, we have listed out the countries recognized by the Hong Kong Drug Office for registration approvals, while applicants should keep in mind that it is mandatory to submit at least one FSC or one CBP certificate issued from the product's country of origin by the respective official regulatory body. If the pharmaceutical product is manufactured outside of Hong Kong, the person responsible for obtaining the registration is the licensed wholesale dealer who imported the pharmaceutical product, or the Hong Kong branch subsidiary representative, agent, or distributor of the overseas manufacturer. Normally, it takes at least 1 month to set up the online account. The whole process is very straightforward, as set out in the slide. Once submitting that online application, you will receive an acknowledgement notice from the Hong Kong Drug Office, and the applicant should wait for the screening officer's further instructions to provide supplementary information. We've also mentioned the fees upon submitting the application, and by the time when the certificate is ready to be obtained in person. The certificate is valid for 5 years and can be renewed after then.
For medical devices and IVDs, on the other hand, they do not require registration or filing prior to sale into Hong Kong. On the other hand, they do generally now require listing, a voluntary listing, before they are accepted by Hong Kong public hospitals in the procurement of those public hospitals. First step, as always, is the classification process for such medical device or IVD. Hong Kong follows the IMDRF classification principles, with a lowest risk class being 1 for medical device or A for IVD, and 4 for medical device, or D for IVD being the highest. The documentation you will require is, first of all, it's worth mentioning that it is only document-based submission process. You'll need relevant particulars of the manufacturer, of the local responsible person. It needs to be a Hong Kong entity that makes the submission. You also need relevant marketing approval and essential principles, because the basis of the listing relies on your home country approval, or at least a certain country approval, because it won't rely on any approvals. For example, an Israel approval is not sufficient. On the other hand, an EU or a US approval is sufficient. There are also certain particulars required for the relevant device, which are detailed here on the slide, but won't go into for the sake of time now. What does the approval timeline look like? There's a document collection process followed by some relevant administrative steps first up. Then once you've made the submission, the medical device administrative control body will make an initial preliminary check. This can result in some back and forwards in our experience, and indeed the MDD seems to be very busy at this time, and depending on the reviewer, can take some time to revert with its more specific questions, particularly in more complex cases. The process then follows this first supplementary notice with more questions, an initial or first review, before there is additional questions, a second review, and a final board approval, whereupon the reviewer will advance or argue for the approval in front of the board meeting that leads to the final approval. The validity of the listing is 5 years. Generally, the time frame is a minimum of 6 months, although it can be much longer depending on the relevant questions and detail that is required in these supplementary phases from the MDD. So that's really the deep dive. Excuse me. That's really the deep dive of each of the GBA approval and the Hong Kong listing or registration. What might this look like if this was a strategy to use to go through for China-wide approvals? Here we've presented possibilities. First, a manufacturer would start with the Hong Kong listing for a medical device or IVD, or the drug registration. That timeline looks like a 6 to 12 month plus, depending on the specific product. In parallel, or at least in process as or begun prior to the final approval, we'd suggest that manufacturers should be sending their sales teams to the relevant, or one of the relevant 19 hospitals in the GBA area to try to have their product sold or committed to be sold to one of these hospitals, because ultimately it's the hospital's decision that determines whether this product is urgently needed, as we have already described. This is also presuming that the product is relatively unique, or at least advanced, and no other similar product is already for sale in China. Once the Hong Kong listing has occurred or been granted, or the drug registration, then you need to ensure that some sales start to occur into public hospitals, following which, and in parallel, you can make the pre-submission to the Guangdong MPA. This will help with some of your sales efforts in those GBA hospitals as they push for the product to be sold to the hospital. The hospital then is the entity itself that makes the full approval application to Guangdong MPA. Once finally approved in the GBA area, of course, the real benefit is you can start to receive revenues and also validation in a smaller pocket of the market, of the wide China market. And don't forget that the Guangdong area is one of the richest parts of China, and it still has 80 million people. Then what might be very interesting is to use such sales and such real-world evidence collected on Chinese ethnic population in mainland China to ultimately support a China-wide approval. For the specifics of that, you will need specific real-world study approvals from NMPA, and we understand that there is real-world study centers being set up in Guangdong region. Finally, you will go through to the China-wide approval at NMPA in Beijing. So that's a very brief overview in our 30 minutes, and we want to be respectful of your time, and we're already 1 minute over. Thank you very much for your attention, and we hope this can be of use to you. If you'd like to receive a copy of the slides afterwards, please do email or let us know. There'll also be a follow-up email to all registered attendees. We, as a regulatory service provider, can of course support with many steps of this process, and we will be pleased to speak to you if you have any interest or further questions. There is a little bit of a blurb about some of our available services, and here's the contact information for Jackie and me. Right, let's stop there. Thank you for your time. Have a very nice day.